In life, we will meet resistance, which can leave us feeling worn down and worn out. But we can find a reason to keep going. Show up, push through, and never give up.
So, like I said, we've been talking about never giving up. And so we've been really focusing on the word resilience, right? And so if we can go back and look at the definition of resilience, it is our ability to bounce back and grow stronger after we have struggled, failed, or faced hard stuff in our life. You know, that encompasses a whole lot of things. We're talking about big or small challenges, right? And challenges are going to come to all of us, right? It's one of those things that's just a part of life, that we're going to have some type of challenge that's going to pop up. And it may be just small or maybe good. It doesn't matter. Like, we're going to have that. That's just what comes with life. And see, one of the things that we have to remember, though, is that even in those big or small challenges, we have to realize that we can't give up. Right? And that's the big part about resilience, and that's where resilience comes in. We're learning how to not give up. And I want to encourage you guys with that. And we're going to continue, like today, we're going to wrap up some things, but I do want to finish a story later on for you guys. If you guys remember a couple weeks ago, I talked about one of my basketball players at Concordia, Maddie. But we're going to wrap that story up a little bit later, right? You see, one of the big things I feel like that makes it kind of easier for us to give up comes from this, and it's. I want you guys to know, like, I'm not knocking what we have today, but today we do have a culture of convenience, right? Like, we have everything that's readily available to us, right? I can literally go jump on my phone and I can see what the latest, like, viral TikTok trend is, right? I can literally go and find out, like, who was the emperor of Egypt or whatever the case may be, like Pharaoh, right? Sorry, my bad. Got my peoples mixed up, right? But I can go and do all those things. I can find that information so easily and so quickly, right? I can go back and see who was somebody who hit 630 home runs for the Seattle Mariners. I can tell you right now, Ken Griffey Jr. That's easy, right? But that's right here. That's knowledge that I should not have about baseball, but I do have that knowledge. But all those things are available to us, and it's awesome. It really is awesome that we have this culture of convenience, that we have things readily available to us. But there's also a downside to that, right? Because the thing is, us getting so used to convenience and speed and ease in every area makes the places where things aren't easy that much harder to get through. You see, the thing that we have to remember is that when it comes to resilience, it's like a muscle, right? And if we're being real honest, like it's like a muscle. Oh, you got SpongeBob up there. Yeah, that's my favorite episode, right? But like, think about it though. So like, when I start talking about resilience, when I start talking about a muscle, right? Again, this is like the coach coming out of me with this. But I think of like, hey, so somebody gets hurt, right? Maybe they break something, right? And they're in a cast, right? What happens to that muscle over time? Like, it atrophies, right? It gets weak, right? And so that can kind of be the case of what sometimes can happen. Like, if let me take it to this place, right? Maybe it's not the fact of, maybe it's a muscle, maybe like an actual, like, hey, like I broke like my ankle or something like that. Let's say maybe it's you speaking Spanish, right? Like, if you don't speak Spanish for like a long time, like, you lose it, right? Let's be real honest. Like, that happened to me. Like, I'm like, yo quiero Taco Bell, right? That's all I got, right? That's all I can go with, right? That's all I get. And I'm like, I just know in there it says, I think I want Taco Bell. Like, that's it. It's so bad. But with all of that though, right? With all of that, like, if we don't use resilience enough, it weakens, right? It weakens, right? You guys remember that, right? You guys remember that, right? But it does, it weakens. But here's the thing, like, we have to understand is that when something comes up, right? When something comes up, that takes a lot of work, or it takes longer than we are used to, and we haven't had the practice to be resilient. It feels impossible to take on, right? And let's just think about it. Let's just talk some difficulties within that, right? Because when I think about a lot of difficulties, I'll be real honest, like, one of the tough things that's really difficult is relationships, right? Relationships are really hard. Like, it's sometimes really hard to work with people on a lot of things. And if we're being honest, it may not just be like, maybe it's just not like a significant other. Maybe it's something like with Jesus, or maybe it's with our parents. Like, relationships can be tough. And if we're being honest, like it's so easy for us to want to go and give up. You see, when I started thinking about all these relationships, when I started thinking about a lot of different things, I don't just like fall, again, on just the relationship side of it with people. Also, too, I think about maybe when we face their challenges or difficulties within our sport, or maybe in other extracurricular activity, whatever it may be, like if we have not built up resilience, it makes it a little bit tougher for us when it comes to facing these challenges. And the thing is, as frustrating and as difficult and painful that these times are, I want to ask this question. What if those difficulties were doing something in us and to us, right? What if those difficulties were molding us into something better? What if there was more to the story? What if there was something on the other side of that difficulty? You see, last week, Ren talked about a dude named Paul, and Paul was, I'll be real honest with you, Paul's one of my favorite dudes like in the Bible. I mean, he was a guy that was walking around for a long time. He was known as Saul, and he was going and he was killing Christians. And then, poof, a light appeared, right? He was blinded, and he went and he changed who he was, and he changed who he wanted to be because he wanted to do things for Christ, and he went on to become one of the greatest missionaries in Scripture, in the Bible. A good chunk of this here is written by him in the New Testament. Like, it's so amazing, all the things that happened. But if we're being real honest with Paul, like Paul he faced a lot of difficulties, right? He would go to towns and he would go proclaiming Jesus, and these towns were like, nah, bro, don't want what you're selling, right? It's like, you get like that one person that comes up to your door and you're like, bro, like seriously, no soliciting, read the freaking sign, right? But they don't do it, right? And it's just, it becomes a thing like where now you have to go through this. And here's the thing, that's what a lot of towns, a lot of places did not want to hear, this message of Jesus Christ. And what ended up happening to Paul was that he was stoned, right? I mean, he faced a lot of things. And I'll be real honest with you, Paul got to a place where he felt so just down, like in that lowest place, in the dumps, like pretty much. He got to that place, and he honestly wanted to give up. He wanted to give up what Christ had put in his heart. He just didn't want to keep going because he just didn't feel like it was going anywhere. And he had a dude, a good friend of him that went with him, his best friend that went with him on his first missionary trip. His name was Barnabas, all right? Barnabas' name means encourager, okay? And if we're being honest about things, like Barnabas did a whole lot with Paul, and he encouraged him, he helped him, and he helped him to see that he could go and do this. He had Christ on the side, but that he could go and do this. I mean, that's a solid friend there, a great friend. He was an encourager, and that's one of the things that, just a side note for me, if you want to know something about me, that's what I live by. I live by simply be a Barnabas, right? Be an encourager. That's what it's about for me. Like, be an encourager in your lives, be an encourager in anybody who comes across, whose paths that I cross, like to be an encourager in their lives. But that's a side note. That's a message for another day. But Paul says this in Romans chapter 8, verse 18. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. You see, I love this passage because Paul has such a cool perspective on this. His perspective is something that is, it's a shift in perspective. It's a change in the lens. It's changed how he sees things. Like the suffering that I may have, and like, let's be real honest, like Paul was going through a whole lot of suffering. He was dealing with a whole lot of things. And so if we're being real honest with that, like Paul was literally on a struggle bus, but he had an idea, he had a thought, he had something. And let's be real honest, like when you think about this, like whenever you've gotten to a place where you have been dealing with something, like you know that you've been there, but as you give that encouragement to somebody else, you look at it from a different lens. Like, for instance, like me, my first year of doing ministry, like I wanted to do everything. Like I wanted to do everything. I was going like literally 90 miles an hour all the time. And what happens when you go 90 miles all the time? You burn out. Yeah, you run out of gas. You burn out, right? You have vroom too hard, right? And so what ended up happening was that I was at that place where I was struggling. Like I was like, man, like I don't know if I want to do ministry. I don't know if I want to do things. And I had a good friend of mine who told me this. He said, "Look, buddy, I love you, man. You're gonna do some amazing things in ministry, but you got to learn how to say no, and you got to take that time for yourself. Yes, you can do everything. You can say yes, everybody, but the thing is, at the end of the day, that does nothing healthy for you." And you have to learn how to sharpen yourself and be in that space. And yes, that sounds like something crazy and something radical to say no all the time, but it has allowed for me to be in a space of where I'm able to go and I've been doing ministry now for 11 years, almost 11 and a half years. Like, so to think about that conversation, but he saw something on the other side because for him, that's what he had to do because he was like me. You see, Paul has this perspective shift. And the thing that we have to understand back in this verse, back in this scripture, is that we have to understand what Paul is not saying about resilience. What he is not saying is that resilience is about getting over it. Whatever you're facing, it's not about just getting over it. Resilience isn't about just moving on. Resilience isn't about not making such a big deal about what you are facing, right? I mean, let's be real honest. I feel like we live in a society today that's like, no, don't like blow all that up because I don't want to hear about it. It's like, no, man, like people need to know that we are hurting, that we're struggling because we need each other to build each other up. You see, what Paul is saying is that we are suffering. We are experiencing troubles, and those things are real. But those things are doing something in you and I. Those things are working on us and through us. And who we become on the other side of it, that is the glory that will be revealed in us. And that's what Paul mentions. It's better than any troubles that we face. That's the glory that he mentions. That there's another side to this. There's a whole other side that we can get to, and that's the perspective shift. You know, and that might sound easy. Okay, yeah, go and change my perspective. Maybe that'll help. Yada yada. That might seem easy, but I know for some of us that still may not help. And I know that this is hard because let's be real, like the troubles, the challenges, the setbacks that you're dealing with may seem never ending. So you're barely able to stay in the fight against whatever you're facing. And if that's you, I just want to be real with you guys. And, you know, I'm going to be so real with you guys from just who I am. I'm going to be transparent. But I just want to tell you guys, look, if you're somebody who's dealing with that, I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you are facing that. I'm sorry that there's so much that is just weighing on you. But I do want to tell you this truth. The truth is this, even though it might feel like it might be impossible to bounce back, I want you to know that God has got you. There's more that he is doing with your story. And this is not the end. Your difficulty is not the end of your book. It's not the end of the story that is being written about you. There's more for you on the other side. And so this difficulty, whatever you are facing, this is not the end of it. And I want to encourage you with that. I want to encourage you with knowing that God is working, God is moving, and is doing something big in you in the midst of this trial, right? And let's be real honest. One of the things I usually say to people when we're facing challenges is that, and just if you guys know the story about the Israelites as they traveled in the desert, it's the fact of that to go to the promised land. It's the fact that you're either walking into a desert or you're in a desert or you're walking out of a desert, right? So you are facing some type of challenge along the way. Like it's going to happen. But at the end of it, there's more to be revealed in you. What did you learn from that difficulty, from that struggle? You see, remember what Paul said. The suffering now won't compare to the eternal glory we'll receive later. In other words, there is a you on the other side of this. A glory, and again, the suffering does not get the last word. So here's the good news. You ready for some good news? You don't have to master that setback this second. Okay? You don't have to master it right now. It may take time. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay if it takes time. But eventually it will become lighter. In some cases, you'll realize that what you thought would be a lifetime was really just a brief moment in your life. And the next time you face something like it, you'll do it knowing that you can be resilient. But in order to do so, you have to never give up on you. God won't give up on you. Ren and I will not give up on you. So you can't give up on yourself. You see, one of the things that I always tell people, or I've told athletes as I've coached, is this: when they are struggling with something, whenever they're facing whatever it might be, whether it's in the moment kind of a sport or in the moment kind of activity, or whether it's something just as a whole, like they're like, man, I just feel like giving up. I just feel like giving up. And one of the things I always tell athletes is because, again, you're going to have some type of voice that's telling you that you can't, all right? Whether it be from the enemy or whether it be the voice in your own head. And so what I always encourage people with is this: don't let the 6 inches in between your ears tell you that you can't. Don't let the 6 inches in between your ears tell you that you can't. This is one of the same things that I told my basketball player, Maddie. She came from having her first day of PT, right? First day of PT. And for y'all who may not have been here, earlier in the season, Maddie ended up having a really bad sprained ankle, grade 3, which is like pretty much the worst you can have before you break it. So she had a grade 3, she tore ligaments, all that jazz. She was down. She had there's a whole lot of things that were going on up here that she was struggling with. And so I told this to her first day of doing PT, right? She met with our trainer, and she came up to me, and I wish I could paint this another way, but she literally came up to me, and she's like, bro. Like, just like that. Not even like, bro. It was, bro. And I'm like, oh, no. What's going on? And she's like, I can't do this. I can't do this. This sucks so much because I cannot do what there's no way I'm coming back this year. There's nothing I can do. Like, I am so overwhelmed by this. I cannot do this. She's like, on top of this, I got to keep this up. I got to keep this up. I got to keep this up. And so I looked at her and I told her that. I said, hey, don't let the 6 inches in between your ears tell you that you can't. But on top of that, in this time, manage your time, right? Take that time. You need to get yourself locked back in with some friends that can encourage you, that can walk alongside you. Know that I am praying for you, which is, I want you to know, like, just to hear that for a coach to say that to an athlete, which again is kind of, we gotta watch ourselves with that. Like to say that to her meant the world, because she hadn't been praying for herself. I mean, she literally was at a place when this injury happened, she hit rock bottom. But I encouraged her and I told her, look, dude, I think you will come back. But you'll come back not on your time, but on God's time. And it's at that point, that's when he's going to need you to be, whether in the game or doing whatever he needs for you to do, he's going to do what he needs to do through you. But you're going to come out on the other side of this, and this whole journey, this whole challenge, this whole difficulty that you are going through right now, this desert that you are in, I want you to know that's not the end. You're going to come out of this, whether it's next year or whatever, you're going to come out of this a different person. But I hope in the whole process of all of this that you have learned something about who you are, and as this challenge has challenged you, you now can go encourage somebody else who may get injured in the same type of way that you have gotten injured, or maybe facing any type of injury. And so, of course, Maddie did what any kind of teenage girl will do, just kind of looked at me and just rolled her eyes, like, whatever. And I just walked off, and I was like, bro, come on, man. I just gave you some straight up knowledge. Like, what is going on? Ugh, you frustrate me. But it took those words hitting her at the right point in time. And she came back to me one day, further down in PT, and she looked at me and she said, Coach. I said, yeah. The whole 6 inches thing that you told me about? She's like, yeah. She's like, finally made sense. I said, huh, good. I'm glad you got it. So what are we going to do from here? She's like, well, I want to tell you that I will be back this season for the last 2 games. And so this picture right here, this is actually the first game that she was able to come back. The last 2 games that we had of the season, this was in warm-ups. And when I tell you it was good to see that knucklehead shooting the ball again, it was awesome to see that. But she had to, learn for herself. She had to understand that, look, like these things that I'm facing, like this is not the end. This is not the end for me. Like there's still more to my story. Like, yeah, like I've been a basketball player all my life, but I'm more than just a basketball player. Like if you're in this room and you're an athlete, like you are more than an athlete. If you're in this room and you are somebody who is in band or you're in dance or you're in whatever, you are more than just that. You are a daughter and a son. You are beloved. You are worthy. You are valuable. Again, like I said a couple weeks ago, so valuable that God sent his son Jesus for you and I. You are so worthy. So when we struggle with things, it breaks my heart that we don't lean to God. But also, too, it breaks my heart that we don't realize that we have more within us than we can truly fathom. We really do. And I'm not just saying that as a coach, having been on a field, sweating, yelling at football players, or being in a gym, yelling at basketball players. I'm saying this from the place of that I believe that we have so much more inside of us that we are yet to have tapped into. And I believe that's a part of the resiliency. But that's the big part of believing in you. So do you believe that on the other side of this difficulty, I will be somebody changed? It might be difficult to see it now, but I will be somebody new, somebody different. I will have learned from that, and I will have been forged into something better. So I want to leave you guys with this question as we get ready to go to small group. What's one thing you can do to remind yourself that who you are now is not who you will be on the other side? And as you think about that, as you remember that God is doing something in you. You may not see it right now, but he is doing something in you. He's helping you face this challenge, whatever it may be. So what I want to tell you is this. Don't give up the hope that is in you.